Hello and welcome to our show, Great Britain in Focus. I'm Anna Allain.
And I'm James McCullough. We present a special report on the Day of Prayer at Westminster Cathedral in reparation for the sins of abuse within the Church, featuring an interview with Bishop John Keenan.
We join our on-location team in Manchester as they follow the annual Marian Procession around the city streets, capturing the testimonies of ordinary people who were participating.
And Joana Bogle speaks to Kerri at Clarity Life Consulting about her work in helping Christians make life decisions.
Bishop John Keenan and Father Dominic Allain, Pastoral Director of Grief to Grace, led a day of prayer at Westminster Cathedral, asking forgiveness and offering prayers of reparation for sins of abuse within the Church.
We joined the day of prayer and spoke to Bishop John and Father Dominic about the need for divine grace to succeed in the spiritual battlefield, and how Eucharistic reparation is the route to healing and new life in the Church.
Anger is a difficult emotion for Christians. How many times are you told, you're not allowed to be angry. Anger is a deadly sin. Never let the sun go down on your wrath. All of that is true until we realize that we're dealing with the anger that is alerting us to danger and fear. That's a God-given passion. Jesus Christ himself was angry. He threw over the money changers' tables. He made a whip out of cord. He drove them out of the temple, shouting at them. The Son of God, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Why? Because they were outraging against the holy temple. Something sacred was being defiled.
There are people who would say, because the Church has abusers within her, the Church has no role at all in healing this crisis. And nothing could be further from the truth, I would say, because that's the deepest wound for someone who's been wounded by a priest. The place that should have been the safest place for you, the place which should have been a sanctuary where you were able to find God and the fullness of your own human maturity, has become an unsafe place. And until you recover that, you're not healed. It's as simple as that. So if the Church was the place of wounding, the healing is going to come when you recognize that not all priests are abusers. And if some wolf in sheep's clothing stole the image of Jesus from you and the beauty of what his Church has to offer you, then we need to show you the true face of the Good Shepherd who lays down his life for you.
We have to acknowledge the anger and say that in many cases it is an entirely righteous anger. Anger is a passion, the Catechism says, given to us to alert us to danger, to alert us to what is sinful and fearful. So that the anger of abuse survivors against a Church which hurt them is understandable. And the anger against the Church is most strong and powerful when that same Church refused to believe them or hear them. That is a double wound. We have a theology that says your body is a temple. Don't you think that Jesus is equally outraged at the profanity expressed towards the body of his little ones by the very people who should understand how sacred that temple is? So it's in that context that we allow people to grieve and to be angry. The French poet and philosopher Paul Claudel reminds us that Jesus did not come to take away our suffering, but to transform it by his presence. And it is a healing for the survivor of abuse to know that Jesus was present, that Jesus understands what it is like to suffer. The central part of what we do in our programme is to walk through the sorrowful mysteries of the Passion. At each stage, looking at how Jesus suffers for love of us, but also showing him our wounds. Discovering a Jesus who doesn't save from a safe heaven, from a distance where he's simply play acting, but a Jesus who saves by taking on himself human sin and those wounds, by offering as part of his sacrifice abuse and torture that is unimaginable, so that we should always know that whatever we suffer, he is there alongside us in solidarity, not play acting, not from a safe distance, but there grieving with us.
So there are many people who understandably are so angry with the church that they don't want to have anything to do with the church again, but we need to see that anger as a kind of defense and as something that we need to stand in the teeth of and say, yeah, you have a right to be angry with us. And to allow them to express that anger, because anger is a stage of grief.
God our Father, all powerfully, merciful, forgiving and gentle, we implore your mercy, intervention and healing. We unite ourselves with your mercy as we make our solemn confession of sin and join our sufferings with Jesus on the cross, placing them in the treasury of the church and the salvation of every soul. Through Jesus Christ our Lord.
So part of healing is expressing anger. As part of our program, we have a whole day expressing anger. Yes, and physically expressing it, physically getting it out. Because it's stored in your body like all the memories of abuse. And by the end of that day, you see people's bodies change. You see their faces relax. They lose 10 years. Because anger is a very destructive emotion when not earthed like electricity. It's powerful. It's given to us for a reason, to protect and defend ourselves, and that's where the anger came from the inability to defend ourselves. But anger, like electricity, needs to be safely earthed, otherwise it will discharge in a dangerous, inappropriate way.
In these times we are discovering that the Lord is asking us to develop a ministry of healing for victims of abuse. The Lord is bringing home to us, opening the eyes of the church more and more to the spiritual evil of abuse, but equally, if not more so, to the suffering of survivors. This isn't, even though they may have been abused years ago, the sufferings today is immediate and it's existential. It's something, as Father Dominic said, is that they live in a body in crisis. And so we are called to bring healing ministry to them, a ministry that admits to them the truth of what's happened to them, the horror of what's happened to them, a ministry that is with them, a ministry that offers them human means of healing through psychological processes, but above all, a ministry that brings spiritual grace into the healing through the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ in the sacraments of the church and in the sacraments of healing.
Abuse is what we call an impacted grief. How do you grieve when you've had to keep a secret? How do you grieve when you're ashamed of what happened and you believe mistakenly that it's your fault? How do you allow yourself to feel sorry for yourself if you then went on to repeat a pattern? So the first thing that we do as part of our Grief to Grace program, the first aspect of healing is grieving, is allowing ourselves to feel that sorrow. And that has to be done supported by people who understand and care. And it needs to be done by being witnessed in a safe environment and in a totally compassionate and understanding way. If that's true of a Grief to Grace healing program, it's also true of our church. We need to recognize that one of the ways in which the church will heal from this is by accepting that she has to witness the grief of abuse survivors. Witness it and compassionate it. Not hope to keep it hidden away. Not even to hope to have it hidden in individual meetings with victims, but to find some way of bringing it to be a community reality.
The bishop prostrates himself, and it's an eloquent sign. First of all, it signifies the helplessness of the church in confronting the evil of abuse. We're in a spiritual battle here, and it needs the spiritual authority of Christ to come into this with his grace and to be able to bring healing and bring new life, bring new hope. This is a problem, an evil beyond our human power to fix. And in doing so, we ask our Lord to lift us up in great hope that he will lift us up. So a sign of humiliation, but equally an appeal to hope.
We made a good reparation today. Our hearts and souls, we were in it. I felt in it 100%.
I found it very moving, very powerful, and it really brought home to me in particular how much the sin of abuse offends God and wounds the heart of Jesus. Seeing a bishop prostrate himself in front of the Lord in the Blessed Sacrament in reparation for this appalling sin was very powerful.
It is only through prayer that the church is going to overcome this and heal the abuse and heal the church.
The Marian Procession in Manchester is an annual Catholic event held on the first Saturday in October, the month dedicated to the Rosary, when a large wooden cross, followed by a decorated statue of Our Lady, is carried by young people in stages along the way.
Armed with sturdy shoes, rosary beads, a bottle of water and an umbrella, we followed the 2-mile route along with 1,000 or so people praying the rosary and singing hymns. We spoke to some of them about what the procession means to them in the secular age.
Kerri and Mary through the streets of Manchester, through the Curry Mile, and to here on this spot here in this park.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
We live in a secular world, and there's a lot of secular influences, but really when you're with God, you're happy, and that's what brings me to events like this. I just feel happy. It's an authentic happiness when you're with the Lord, and so that's what's brought me here today, really.
I am a married Catholic man with 5 children, and I've been doing the Marian Procession for the last 9 years. I was at the first one, and here I am again today. Amazing grace is poured out through my life through this procession.
It's about taking the pain really of carrying her, and we swap over, you know, in turn.
This is all in honour of Our Lady, so this is the cape we put on every year. This is to represent Our Lady, the untier of knots. So any problems you may have, come to Our Lady, she will untie them for you. I've become a better man, a better father, a better husband. I've learnt how to be a better Catholic, all through the intercession of Our Lady. We pray as a family, we pray the Rosary, I pray nightly with my children, and yeah, we go to Mass every Sunday. More if we can, but make sure we go every Sunday. I'm a convert, so we did have that. I didn't care until I met my wife, but I'm in the faith 11 years now, and it's been the greatest blessing of my life. It might be a controversial statement, but the dad is the head of the family, and the children look up to the father as well as the mother, but the children certainly look up to the father. It takes the weight off the mum to pray, to discern, to do what needs to be done in the family. You know, the responsibility is great, but so's the joy that comes with it.
It makes me happy to express my love for Our Lady, but in a public way. I just think that's amazing, and it's a witness to the community, really.
I'm a stonemason, but it was still quite heavy, and you know, it hurt my hip a bit, but I just kept thinking of Jesus carrying that cross. We've all got a cross to bear, and I tried to take over from some people who were hurting a bit, and they just didn't want to give it up.
I'd recommend it to any man who wants to buck the trend of modernism.
As much as it's worrying times, it is predicted, you know, by Mary in 1610 as well, that it is the most worrying times that will be our best times, and the Catholic faith will come back strong.
Mass is beautiful because really heaven and earth touch, that's how I see it, the consecration, and there's a lot of mystery around that obviously, but I believe in Christ's word, and I believe that's what's happening, and that makes me really want to be there.
All I can say is, taste and see, the Lord is good.
Kerri Christopher has set up a consultancy helping Christians in making life decisions. In an age of choice and opportunity like never before, people can be paralysed by too much choice.
Yes, so we now join Joana Bogle as she speaks to Kerri to uncover how prayer brings us closer to knowing God's will in our lives. She also speaks about how St. Ignatius's spiritual exercises were an inspiration for her own decisions made in her life, as well as being the basis for her work now with other people.
Hello, I'm Joana Bogle, and I'm going to be talking to Kerri Christopher, who runs a consultancy helping people make decisions. This struck me when I heard about it, and strikes me now as rather unusual. So, Kerri, you run a Christian consultancy, and it helps people make decisions.
Yeah, so it's called Clarity Life Consulting. Life coaching is something that's taking off big time in the secular world, and some of it's great, and some of it is based on helping people make $1 million and wake up at 6 a.m. every day, and things that I'm not necessarily interested in helping people with. But what I've noticed is that, especially in my work with university students and young adults, and even new mums who are navigating a life change, people have trouble making decisions, and they aren't sure how to incorporate their faith into that. Do they just wait for God to tell them what to do? Do they just decide for themselves? How do they pray about it? How do they know if they've heard God in the first place? There are lots of different issues, and it could be something really simple, like whether or not you should take a new position at the office, or it could be something really complex, like should I marry this person, right? There's a whole range of things that people really struggle with, and I know because I have been one of them, and I've been blessed to sort of grow a lot in the last 5 to 10 years and make a lot of interesting decisions and learn from them as well.
We're all worried as Christians, very worried about this consumer culture in which so much is thrown away, starting with food. Do you think this is a problem?
I think we can say we're a generation that's spoiled for choice, in the sense that it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because we have opportunities available to us that previous generations just didn't have. You know, I'm from America, I'm living in the UK, I can fly back and forth. That's unusual in the history of the world to be able to do that. So we're very blessed by choice, but we're also paralyzed by choice. We're told as children we can be anything we want to be, which isn't true, actually, right, for most of us. And it can be really paralyzing because then you have to keep choosing everything. Where am I going to go to school? What am I going to study? What am I going to do for work? I could do anything, right? It's actually exhausting for us as a culture. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword, and we've got to sort of navigate this fine line very carefully.
So there's a whole problem here, which is consumerism writ large. What about the smaller things? Do people come to you to ask, Silly things, which soap powder to buy, or does this dress look right? Or is it all larger things?
It's mostly larger things. What I've noticed in myself and in others is that sometimes the questions about the small things are actually questions about the big things. Now, obviously, the Lord has given us reason, intellect, free will to be able to make good choices, especially about little things. But when we get into medium to large decision territory, we really usually need some help from the Lord and from others.
And do you urge people to pray? Do you have particular forms of prayer or even literal written prayers that you are able to offer? How does that work?
Yeah, I encourage people to find the style of prayer that works for them. So some people really thrive off praying the rosary. They love meditating on the mysteries of Christ. Other people really struggle to pray the rosary and in fact much prefer scriptural meditation, for example. These are different forms of devotional prayer. Obviously, we all pray the liturgy, which is the church's prayer, but when it comes to personal devotional prayer, I recommend that people find the one that works for them. And sometimes you have to try different things to find out what works for you.
There's a problem too, certainly big in Britain, of a rather broken generation. For the first time in our history, we have very substantial numbers of not children but grown-ups who haven't got a mother and a father, but have a very complicated series of difficult relationships. And then you have to operate as a result. Some of them are very broken, literally unhappy. How do you navigate with people like that who come about a decision but may also carry a lot of wounds?
Yeah, I think we're all wounded in different ways, and certainly the generations now, mine included, have really suffered from massive cultural changes in family life. I do recommend that people seek out a good Christian therapist who can help them work through these issues, or a good priest even, someone who can really help them experience God's healing in their life. That just may be a really healthy relationship. But what I find is that a lot of us struggle to know what a healthy relationship looks like, right? So finding good role models is really key to look at healthy marriages, healthy family relationships, and say, okay, ideally, I'm not this person, I don't have that personality, but I see those virtues on display, and I'd like to try to model those in my own life. So I'm going to set about doing that very slowly, very gradually. But because I have someone who's living that life and I can see what it looks like, it's a lot easier to proceed towards that goal.
Is there anything particular in the church? I'm thinking of any saints or heroes or heroines, or a particular devotion, or even a place, a shrine, place of pilgrimage, that has helped you or inspired you to this? Because it's a very unusual apostolate.
It is. St. Ignatius of Loyola, obviously, he created the spiritual exercises out of his own experience, which I think most people don't usually realize. It was sort of his own path of conversion that led him to draw up the spiritual exercises and then to make them manageable for people who are still working, who can't come away for 30 days, even though we'd all like to do that. So he's just wonderful, and I really appreciate how willing he was to adapt them to people's needs. So it's not sort of a rigid thing that you absolutely have to do it absolutely this way every time, but these are the general principles, and then you as an individual with your director are going to walk through those principles in your particular way, in your particular circumstances.
Do you, personal question now, pray for the people you are trying to help?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because this is a grace. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to work with people, and you find Jesus there, right? This is where we meet Jesus in our neighbor, obviously in the Eucharist, but we really meet him in our neighbor, and it's a grace to be trusted. Obviously, everything is confidential, but it's a grace to be trusted with people's intimate space of decision-making. That's a very vulnerable place to be, and for people to open up to me is really a gift.
And in your own life, have you found that the things that you've learned to share with other people, have they worked in your life?
They certainly have. I'm very blessed to have a wonderful husband, and he's quite good at just encouraging me to focus on the particular thing in front of me rather than getting caught up in the big picture and wondering about 5 steps down the line. And that's something I've really incorporated into my own life and into my own practice to help others, to stay focused on the thing in front of us, to discern that and discern it well, and not to worry too much about all the multitude of things in the future that may or may not happen.
And where do you think things are going from here? Would you like to see more people trying to develop this sort of work? And what do you think the church specifically has got to say to what we've agreed is in many ways a wounded and rather troubled generation in the West?
Yeah, I hope lots of people learn how to make better decisions. I know I've been graced to learn it in my own life, and I hope others do as well. I think the church is a mother, right? So she's here to love us and to heal us and to encourage us, sometimes very strongly, about what we need to do, but to also offer us the Father's love, which I think is the thing that's primarily missing for so many of us who come from broken homes or broken relationships or broken societies, right? We all have these layers of things. And the Lord is reaching out to us and encouraging us to find our security and root our identity in Him. And that's something that I think people struggle with, and it'd be great if everyone could sort of move in that direction. Obviously, it's a lifelong journey, isn't it? We're all doing that. We're all learning every day.
To find our identity in Him. Final thought, what about people who have very little or almost no real knowledge of Christ or of His church? At one time, there was a general knowledge. Most people, for example, would have learned the Lord's Prayer through some cultural experience at school, most obviously, but often through some youth group or something. It was awfully normal to have some Christian input, even if it didn't happen at home. And huge numbers of people, something happened at home, even if it wasn't very Catholic. Do you find that you're ever talking a language that people literally don't understand at all?
Yes and no. I think there are things in our culture and things in our human nature that are universal. So this longing to be loved, this longing to be affirmed. We hear a lot of negative comments about the snowflake generation, but I think we need to stop and ask, have they experienced love at the core of their being, right, from God our Father, through the family, through the society that would have been normal, well, not normal, but at least more common, 50 or 100 years ago. Why are they so delicate, so to speak? Are they lacking that rootedness in the identity of the Father? That's certainly something to think about, I think.
So finally, would you see this work expanding? And is it only in Britain? Is it in your native America? Where do you go from here? And how do people reach you? Do you have a website?
Thank you. Yes, I do. I have a website, claritylifeconsulting.com. I can meet with people over Skype, so it kind of doesn't matter where in the world you are in that regard, as long as we can find a good time. I also meet with people in person, and I give talks just right now in the UK, although I'm happy to travel for that as well.
So it looks as though there's plenty of scope for helping people make decisions with God through the Lord.
Thank you for joining us. Full versions of these interviews can be found on our website. And please remember that we rely on your donations to continue bringing you great British programming.
Please visit our website, ewtn.co.uk, for further details on how to donate. Do join us next time. Goodbye and God bless.